Oh, Roberts, it was you in 2024 who said that we're in the second American Revolution and it will be bloodless if the left allows us to be. Yes, and you're proving exactly what I said, or what I wanted you to understand, which is that we on the right are going to go about political and policy reform peacefully. That's how we operate. But the left, some on the left, are so unmoored, they're so untethered from the rule of law, from going about this civilly, that there would probably be a rise in violence.
Welcome back to the Kevin Roberts Show. I'm Larry O'Connor. And Kevin, today we're discussing something that's become pretty impossible to ignore in American politics: political violence. In recent weeks alone, we've seen that attempted attack connected to the White House Correspondents Dinner, somebody obviously trying to shoot up the president, the room, cabinet secretaries. It's horrific, and it's not a one-off. Many conservatives believe the media and the political left have spent years normalizing rhetoric that portrays their opponents not simply as wrong, but as dangerous. And this sort of dovetails off of last week's conversation about the Southern Poverty Law Center. So, Kevin, let's start right there. Are we dealing with just isolated incidents from Butler to the other assassination attempts on the president to the tragedy of Charlie Kirk? Or are we watching the consequences of a deeper cultural problem?
Definitely the latter. I mean, this is not a both sides problem. Yes, there are a few kooks on the right. There always have been, but there are thousands, if not tens of thousands, of kooks on the left. And American society shouldn't tolerate that. And I would like to think that we at Heritage would have intellectual honesty that if that situation, the reality were reversed, we would say it as well, because it simply cannot exist in any civil society, but especially a republic. You mentioned all of those instances. I would add to that two other pieces of data, if I may. The first is, think about the rhetoric of liberal leaders, Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, in the election campaigns of 2020 and 24. Think about what Chuck Schumer and other Senate Democrats said about sitting members of the U.S. Supreme Court once the Dobbs memo was leaked.
Oh, yeah.
Think about in the aftermath, 2 days after the attempted assassination at the White House Correspondents Dinner, not just of the president, vice president, but way too many members of the cabinet, but that's another story. 2 days after that, Minority Leader in the House, Hakeem Jeffries, doubled down and tripled down on his usage of the word and the rhetoric warfare. This is warfare.
Extreme warfare.
Extreme warfare. These are the kinds of things that cause people who are unhinged to take action. And then the second data point is, you look at the surveys. I started poring over the public opinion surveys once again in that week after the White House Correspondents' Dinner attempted assassination. And it's even worse than the last time I looked, which was around in the week or two after Charlie's assassination. It's something like 9 or 10 times the number of people on the left say it's okay to use political violence to achieve your ends than on the right. It's probably even higher than that. We have to fix this, and ultimately the answer to that is to get those people who would be in that category saying that political violence is okay to be tethered to reality, tethered to institutions other than a political party or the federal government. I, of course, would argue that they go to church, almost any church, but at least to be more tethered to reality. The deterioration of American communities and institutions, schools, churches, et cetera, is very much at the bottom of this.
All right, so you've already, part of my job here is to throw the devil's advocate challenges at you. So you've already stolen one of them from me, which is both sides are guilty of this.
I've been trying to preempt you for months now, O'Connor. I finally succeeded.
So you said this isn't a both sides thing, but that's what they say. They're saying it right now. They're yelling back at you through the screen right now. Both sides are equally guilty of this kind of political violence and the irresponsible rhetoric. All right, so show your work, Dr. Roberts.
Yeah, I'll double down on the devil's advocate since I unintentionally preempted you. And that is, they're probably in the comments saying, oh, Roberts, it was you in 2024 who said that we're in a second American Revolution and it will be bloodless if the left allows us to be. Yes, and you're proving exactly what I said, or what I wanted you to understand, which is that we on the right are going to go about political and policy reform peacefully. That's how we operate. And we have this really big plan that at the time known as Project 2025 to do it. But the left, some on the left, are so unmoored, they're so untethered from the rule of law, from going about this civilly, that there would probably be a rise in violence. And in fact, I talked to my late friend Charlie Kirk about that very thing several months before he was tragically assassinated. And so they are proving the point. And if you look at any measure that I can come up with, so if there's some knucklehead in the comments, and I just mean knucklehead as a friendly jab, I defy you to give me evidence that shows that this is a bigger problem on the right than it is on the left. Now, I will say to my friendly knuckleheads on the left that to the extent it does exist on the right, even though it is a much smaller problem, we want to eliminate that too. So fair enough. But for people, especially people on the right, who are elected officials in our United States Congress, who said in the days after the White House deal, the Correspondents' Dinner deal, that this is a both sides problem, please stop saying that. What that does is give air cover to those people on the left who want to continue to perpetuate a lie, which is that it is as extensive a problem on the right and the left. Why am I passionate in this response to this very fair devil's advocate question? Because it is a matter of life or death. And in order to actually solve something, you've got to be able to diagnose the problem accurately first.
I hear often that there's concerns about the political left utilizing dehumanizing language in their demonization, things like, obviously calling somebody Hitler and a fascist and authoritarian. These are things that used to be reserved, first of all, for the extreme side of the political rhetorical game. Now you see it mainstreamed on network Sunday talk shows, right? These are the things they throw around. Or threat to democracy, right? We may never have another free election in this country again. Is this the kind of stuff you're talking about that now is part of the mainstream opposition to conservative leaders, and it sort of creates a culture and an atmosphere where people who don't need a lot of help to be pushed over the edge will then take things into their own hands?
Yeah, and that's exactly right. And it's bad enough that there would be some people who are doing that, and that kind of rhetoric exists on the right too. To be fair, the level of comfort with arguing for political violence to achieve policy aims is much higher on the left. But all of that to say, what's even worse than that are the media personalities, whether on TV, the radio, or streaming, wherever, who just repeat that rhetoric, and therefore they mainstream it. So rather than, if they've got to play a clip, if they feel like they've got to play a clip with that incendiary language in it, issuing a caveat, which is what they would do for similar statements from our side, they just let them ride on the left. And so then it becomes part of common parlance, just everyday language in community after community, especially in universities and especially among university professors who are among the most leftist people on the planet. That's okay for them to be leftist. It's even okay for them to be tenured and be leftist. What's not okay, in addition to other problems, is that routinely when you see these videos come up from these organizations that are just recording these debates on campus like Charlie used to do, the craziest person who is screaming at the top of their lungs is a professor. Now, when I say that, the solution that I want to offer is fixing higher ed. But when they say that, the other side says that about us, they are using language that could lead someone who's already, a little unstable to be really violent. I think that's exactly what happened with this alleged assassin, the now former teacher who was in DC a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah. And so does this constant portrayal of conservatives in our news media, even in our pop culture, as not just wrong, not just, patriotic Americans that we disagree with, but as uniquely dangerous, does that then contribute to sort of lowering a psychological barrier that some people might have that prevent them from committing political violence, right? It's like, I wouldn't, obviously, no normal person would want to pick up a firearm and try to kill somebody. But if you're hearing constantly from positions of authority and people in authority that those people are dangerous and have to be stopped, that sort of wears down that inherent barrier from
It
committing
is.
violent acts.
I mean, I think it absolutely is, and I want to be fair and say it's not the only factor, right? It's
Sure.
probably the appropriate analogy is it's lighting a match and throwing it in the gas can that's got gasoline in it, and the gasoline in this case is composed of a lot of different ingredients. We have the deterioration of the family. We have the ideological indoctrination in most government funded schools and a lot of private schools. We have the deterioration of not just churches, but these organizations that social scientists, including those on the left, like Robert Putnam, the famous sociologist, called the mediating institutions of society. What's a very fancy academic term. Sorry, I try to avoid them, but it's great to use in this case because what they would mediate are these very differences. And so that match, the match is the incendiary rhetoric, rather than going into a gas can, would just go into or onto like a piece of concrete. It wouldn't have caught fire. In this case, it really does blow up. And so we've got to really address each of those factors. But the easiest to address, because each of us is totally in control of it, is to stop using that language if you're on the left about Donald Trump, or about those of us who run policy organizations who did something as, imagine this, as terrible as recommending policies for public officials.
Yeah. Yeah, that needs to be demonized. They're still demonizing that thing, for crying out
That's
loud.
because it's having a tremendous impact.
Because it's effective.
1,913 recommendations as we sit here. 1,015 have been implemented by the president. Who deserves, or his administration, who deserves credit for that? The president and the cabinet, obviously. But I can sit back and just chuckle. That's why the left hates this thing.
That's quite a project you're describing there. Quite a project. Let's talk about the media's role here. Obviously, the media plays a role either in allowing a platform, a very loud platform and prominent platform, for some of this extreme rhetoric to take place. Do you think these outlets, first of all, do they even distinguish anymore between criticism and demonization? At some point, do they need to step in and say, no, actually, we're better than that. Our brand deserves better than that, and we don't want to contribute to this anymore?
Yes, they should, but that would require these media types to think, to actually engage the brain. And I'm going to be intentionally sharp on this because I think this is an accurate description of some of the media, not all on the left, but certainly some. They don't want to work that hard. It's rare, Larry, that I encounter a journalist, whether on the left, whether on TV or radio or in print, that actually does the kind of research that, even if I disagree with their conclusions and their story, I can sit back and say, well, that's a difference of opinion. That person did really good research. Everyone across the political spectrum needs to do that, but this is endemic on the left, major network news shows. And so the very first thing that could happen is that the executives, the producers of all of those shows could say, look, we, of course, want and need ratings. That's what makes this happen. But one of the ways you might get ratings is if you become known, and not just as a show, but as an entire network, for drilling really hard on what the facts are and delineating between what is demonization and what is, political discourse, which is fine.
Right. And elevating the discussion. Actually make that your brand. Imagine that. But that does take effort. It's hard to do that.
It does. And right now it's too easy because this phenomenon we discuss often in politics, which is the polarization of the country, is real. There is a real polarization aggravated by social media, but also part of that, going back to the analogy of the gas can. We have really got, in order to address political violence and really rabid political discourse, we've got to get upstream and focus on some of these institutions.
Setting aside the media, because there's plenty of blame to go there, but also there's kind of a mainstreaming of extreme language in many quarters, in pop culture, television shows, the music industry, and on social media, where there were certain things and certain ways you would engage in a political debate with an adversary or somebody that you disagreed with that used to be taboo. But now that kind of language has become much more mainstream, and I don't know if it's acceptable, but it's tolerated at the very least. That's a lot harder to address, isn't it, sir?
It really is. I've been worried about that as long as I've been a parent. So about 25 years now. And I know you can relate to this, a lot of people in our audience. And if you aren't a parent, that's okay. There are people you care deeply about. Our culture has become very coarse. And we're all, guilty of participating in that to some extent or another. By that I mean shows we watch, music we listen to, and it's okay to listen to, popular things. I don't want to come across as a prude, but what I would encourage people to do, and I've written about this a couple of times, is integrate into, that mainstream sort of popular music, television, whatever it is, really good and beautiful things, classical music. Go to art museums. And if that's not your thing, just try it once. But at the very least, each of us could step outside and spend more time in God's first book. I know that this may sound goofy or trite, but I really mean it. And when I was president of Wyoming Catholic College, starting back in 2013, I was already an outdoorsman. This is how I was raised. But what I didn't really appreciate until I became president of that college, which is such a noble institution, was the importance to what I would see as our spiritual health. Someone else might just say sort of their emotional health. That's fine. Of being outside. And so when I say repeatedly inside Washington, D.C., go touch grass, the legal kind, like the real kind, like out in the yard. What I'm trying to convey, and other people who use that phrase are trying to convey, is get back tethered to reality, and maybe control the consumption of some of what we're seeing and listening to, and listen to silence. And I actually think that in addition to the more difficult solutions that we have to come up with the institutions on media and so on, the best thing we can do to start solving a problem is to figure out what we can do as individuals. What is it that I can do better, or what is it that I haven't been perfect about? Go outside more. My wife has always encouraged me, Kevin, go speak to the neighbors. And I say, well, they know what I do and they know my politics. I'm not sure they like speaking with you. I said, oh, she says, maybe that's on you. Maybe that's not on them. Those kinds of things actually sound trite. But when you and I were growing up, Larry, in our respective corners of this country, your politics didn't matter. Your neighbor needed help. You knew their name. You knew their kids. You could trust each other. We have a long way to reestablish that in terms of trust. But, we could at least in this year of America 250, look each other in the eye and smile. And if in Northern Virginia, I do that, which I try to do, and I am greeted with, someone who's really dour, think the best and say, man, maybe they're having a really bad day. Keep smiling. Keep inviting people into conversations.
So, Kevin, is it not fair, though, to suggest that people who are passionate about the issues that we are passionate about on our side of the political equation and on our friends on the other side of the political equation, we see these as very high stakes? These are important, some would often, sometimes even venture to say, existential issues that we are debating right now that we care deeply and passionately about. Protecting the unborn is an incredibly important issue. It is life or death. Protecting the integrity of our Constitution. Some would argue, Ronald Reagan would say that our freedom is only one generation away from being lost. So when the stakes are that high, how do you maintain a level of moral activism and seriousness without then venturing into dangerous hysteria?
Yeah, it takes real calibration. I mean, we know that at Heritage because we're in the middle of that fight, and we're also perhaps credited. I think most of the time it's intended to be credit for reminding the country of how urgent the situation is. I have said, and I still believe, we have the 2020s and now maybe the first half of the 2030s to keep America as we know it. When I say that, or we say that at Heritage, what we're not suggesting is that anyone who disagrees with that, should somehow not be part of the process, the policy process. What we're saying is, let's work so hard on the substance of the thing, recognizing what we believe to be the urgency, that we're going to be the best at what we do. And when you're the best at what you do, imagine this is a football game, use another analogy, and it's a 2-minute warning. I think American Republic is probably at that stage, maybe a little bit better. In the 2-minute warning, you got to be crisp. You got to be perfect. And if you're picking up first down after first down and you're marching to win what will be the winning touchdown, and by the way, I think we're still going to do that in the United States, you're not along the way going to, stomp on the shoulder or the leg of your opponent. You don't want to commit a foul along the way. And what I mean, I think this is relevant to American politics today, because if we're going to prevail in taking advantage of this urgency, it's going to be because we have appealed to people who haven't customarily been, quote unquote, on our side. A huge swath of people in the political center, maybe even people on the center left. Our goal at Heritage, for example, is to build a 60% durable, enduring, conservative governing coalition. Well, in order to do that, we have to comport ourselves in a way that isn't just right on the substance, but also is appealing in terms of style. And so that means that we have to be really good at how we say things. We have to be sometimes very careful, very, very precise about that. We always can be better. We're humans, right? But I think if more people realize saying that it's urgent and recognizing that the stakes are high doesn't mean that you have to be jerks. I think that would go a long way, especially on our side. And I still have faith in most Americans, maybe almost all Americans, that if they're presented with that, they're going to say, I might disagree, but at least they're going about that in a fair and good way. I think most Americans are there.
All right, Dr. Roberts, history lesson time, and we're framing everything this year in our 250th anniversary. It's amazing when you read about the founders, where they would often acknowledge and recognize that a Republican government depends on recognizing the legitimacy of your political opposition. Everything falls apart. You can't do this with just, a monolith, one party sort of, I'm using party, they didn't have parties at the time, but you know what I'm saying. The people who disagreed with you were just as legitimate as you are with your thing. And if you look at the Independence Hall debates there in Philadelphia in 1776, the biggest debate they had right at the end there was the northern abolitionist states and the southern slaveholding states. They figured out the northern, John Adams, I mean, the real abolitionist of those founders, he was able to overlook that and compromise with those states, the slaveholding states, for the goal of gaining independence. That seems impossible in today's political climate.
It really does. And it's a shame, because that's such a, frankly, an eloquently related episode. And it reminds me, too, one more invocation of history before I maybe offer a silver lining on the present and the future. I'm a huge fan of the historian H.W. Brands, in part because he's at my alma mater, University of Texas. And Dr. Brands is definitely not on my side politically. He is, however, an exceptional historian and is, I think, objective. Whatever his politics are, I don't know, and I don't know him personally. He's just a really good writer. And one of his best books, I think, is called Heirs to the Founders. Heir is an H-E-I-R, an inheritor of something. And this is about the second generation of American leaders, sort of second founders, if you will. Henry Clay, Daniel Webster, John C. Calhoun. And what's interesting is that 30, 40, 50, even 70 years after the founding, what you described from that founding era is exactly what was happening. And so you go through each generation of American politics and you ask the question, at what point did it break down? It's kind of broken down in this generation in which we live. And so what can change it? What can change it is understanding that if you're on the left, that those of us on the political right have rarely, in the last two generations at least, had, for example, a trifecta of the White House, the U.S. House, and the U.S. Senate. And it tends to be, because of the nature of conservatives, that when that has happened, conservatives move more slowly in policy reform than when the left is there. That's because of the nature of conservatives, I think. But what the left has done in this generation is use phrases like the end of democracy.
Yeah.
Why? Because conservatives are in power. They use words like fascist and Nazi. Why? Because President Trump, very legally, ethically, is using the rule of law to diminish the size and scope of the federal government, which we have been calling for enthusiastically since the days of Ronald Reagan. So what's going to have to change first and foremost is for more thoughtful people on the left to reject that and to say, that's the conservative plan, here's our plan. And I see some people doing that. Now, I don't want them to be in power, not because I think that they're bad people, but because I disagree with their program. And so if, in fact, I'm correct in that there are a few people on the left who are able to have those conversations rooted in substance, then I think we can get back to that. But Look, it's been the better part of 15 years, going back, I think, to the first years of Obama's presidency, which on substance in terms of policy was very radical. It's probably going to take us 15 or 20 to repair that. I would just encourage us to get started. Let's focus on the policy substance. Let's focus on an aspirational vision for the future, and may the best ideas win.
Amen to that, from your lips to God's ears. Political violence never emerges in a vacuum. It grows in environments where fear, hatred, and dehumanization become normalized. Many of us see that happening before our very eyes, and we see the violent repercussions. The deeper question facing the country right now is whether America still has institutions capable of lowering the temperature rather than constantly raising it. Let's pray she does.